The year is 1894. It's nighttime, late September, and two schooner barges named Ironton and Moonlight are being towed across Lake Huron. The steamship they're attached to is fighting high winds and rough waters. It isn't having the easiest time. Despite the weather, another ship called Ohio is also heading for port. The ships are about to pass each other when the Ironton somehow breaks from its tow line and quickly veers off course. It's just past midnight when the 200-foot-long Ironton slams into the Ohio. It rips a massive gash in its hull. The Ohio sinks within 30 minutes. 16 crew are rescued. The Ironton follows soon after. Only 2 members survive. To this day, the remains of both ships still sit at the bottom of Lake Huron. 2 ships among scores more resting in the Thunder Bay Marine Sanctuary. Why are there so many shipwrecks sitting on the bottom of Lake Huron?
That is such a great question and one of my favorite ones to answer. They don't call it Thunder Bay for nothing.
You'll find the sanctuary not too far off the coast of Alpena, Michigan, itself about a 4-hour drive north of Detroit. Stephanie Gandulla is a maritime archeologist there, and she knows exactly why this area has claimed so many vessels.
It's known for terrible weather, sudden fog, storms with 35-foot high waves. So bad weather claimed a lot of vessels. And then if you look on a map of the Great Lakes, where we are in northeast Michigan is really right in the middle of the Great Lakes Basin. So it's a high traffic area, both historically, when there was thousands of schooners and hundreds of steamers working the Great Lakes, and then even today with modern freighter traffic. So lots of collisions because of the high traffic area. And finally, the area is known for shallow shoals. So that's simply a rocky bottom that's perfect for ripping apart a ship's hull, whether it's a wooden hull or a steel hull.
Wow, okay. How many of those have we actually discovered, and how many of those have we yet to find?
Oh, goodness. We have identified 100 within the 4,300 square miles of northwestern Lake Huron. Cool thing is, we think there's at least that many more yet to be found.
With so many sunken ships to be explored, Shipwreck Alley, as it's sometimes called, is a real treasure for scuba divers, tourists, and scientists alike. Stephanie herself, a certified diver, spends plenty of time monitoring this particular stretch of merchant history.
I've been here diving on these shipwrecks for 15 years, and it's always a fresh experience to visit a site, to see these places up close and personal, to be underwater and next to a piece of history that's been sitting there untouched, totally well preserved for over 100 years. It is very powerful no matter how many times I do it.
Of course, diving and exploring is just one part of her role at Thunder Bay. Along with her team and other scientists and researchers, a lot of effort is going into not just finding and cataloging these shipwrecks, but mapping the entire lake bed too. And that's no easy task.
Today, we've only mapped to high resolution about 20% of all of the Great Lakes. And so the sanctuary is a big part of an effort to map all of the Great Lakes to high resolution by the year 2030.
You can imagine that a mapping effort that big requires a ton of data. So much that you might say researchers are drowning in it. But new technology is coming aboard to help make this work a little easier and help the answers come more quickly. Technology that includes, what else? Artificial intelligence. Because what good's a treasure map without an X to mark the spot? I'm Matthew Braga, and this is Working Smarter, a podcast from Dropbox about how AI is changing the way we work and how we get stuff done, and how we navigate through great lakes of data and separate fact from fiction.
So I was a diver long before I even knew of the field of underwater archaeology. And when I learned that I could incorporate my love of scuba diving into another career, I thought, well, yeah, let's do this. 15 years later, here I am in the heart of the Great Lakes and loving it.
Stephanie's official title is Resource Protection Coordinator.
And that title means that I get to do a little bit of everything that's involved in managing a marine protected area.
And what is a marine protected area?
It's simply an area set aside for its special features that we want to protect, whether it's natural resources or cultural resources.
The Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary was established by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, back in 2000. It was created to protect all the shipwrecks resting there, both known and unknown. Do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite shipwreck? Well, it's tough when you have 100 to choose from.
Of course.
My answer does change. I have a couple. I love the shipwreck called Montana, and maybe that's partially because I am from the state of Montana. But it's a really neat site. It's about 65 feet deep, so not terribly deep, and it's a wooden freighter that sank in a fire in 1914, and its engine is standing up 35 feet off the bottom of the lake bed. So it's just a massive sight to experience. And one of my favorite reasons for loving the Montana is seeing the burbot that thrive there. So I don't know if you've heard of a burbot, but
I would like to know more.
The burbot is a freshwater cod, and they're just a really cool Great Lakes fish. They're not afraid of people at all, and they're nocturnal, I think, for the most part. Remember, I'm an archeologist, not a fisheries scientist. I just like to see the fish on the wrecks.
We'll fact check it.
Yes, probably smart. But there's always one or two hanging out at the shipwreck Montana. And then my second favorite is a shipwreck called the Monahans. This is cool because it's probably one of our most accessible shipwrecks in the sanctuary. It's only in about 17 feet of water. It's crystal clear Caribbean blue water, and it has its propeller there, so it's very ship looking. You can immediately look at that and know that you're looking at the wooden freighter that once sailed the lakes.
By the way, we did fact check the burbots, and yes, they are nocturnal. However, I can't confirm whether or not this fish is afraid of people. That is beyond my expertise. Anyways, roughly 100 shipwrecks found to date. Roughly another 100 to find. That is what researchers like Stephanie think. And while modern technology and tools help with that work, many searches still begin the old-fashioned way.
When Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary was designated, many of the sites were already known. A ship burned, they could see it from town, so they pretty much knew where it was. Or people were diving here in the Great Lakes in, 60s and 70s, long before the sanctuary was designated, and they may have located those ships. And looking at the historical records, it would be how anyone, whether a civilian or a historian, an archaeologist, would be where you'd start your search. Like, where are the newspaper reports? So you go to the archive. So that's where you begin your search looking for these shipwrecks. No matter what technology you use out on the water, you're going to start in the archive. Historical newspaper reports, insurance records, enrollment forms, those kinds of details.
Once that classic detective work is done, it's time to get on the water. The most common way to scour the lake bed is to first define a search area. Then you set a boundary on the surface, and finally you run a boat back and forth across that boundary, towing a sonar device behind you. It's a lot like how you might mow a lawn. In this way, you're doing two jobs at once, mapping the lake and looking for shipwrecks.
What we primarily use now is multi-beam sonar. That is where you use sound waves to paint a picture of what the lake floor looks like. And how those sound waves come back to that instrument tells the instrument what the lake bottom looks like, right? So it's going to tell you what shapes are on the bottom. And if you're looking in high resolution, you might be able to find a shipwreck.
And when you say that only 20% of the Great Lakes are mapped, why is that? Is this difficult work?
So, of course, they have been mapped for navigation purposes decades ago. So we have a general idea, so freighters can pass through safely of what the lake bottom looks like. But when we're talking about that mapping to high resolution, it is indeed a very expensive, labor-intensive effort. So you need a boat, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You need that multi-beam, so high technology, expensive equipment. Then you need the very skilled hydrographers and the skilled boat captains.
A hydrographer, by the way, is, reductively speaking, a water scientist, and a captain is a captain.
And it takes a lot of time. You're not just out there zooming back and forth, and then you've got a picture of the lake bottom. It's very tedious, slow, time-consuming work.
And in a situation where you don't know where these shipwrecks are, you don't have that historical record, you don't have that eyewitness account sitting in a newspaper from 100 years ago, how much more difficult is it in those scenarios to actually pinpoint and find the thing you're looking for?
Oh, I think it's very difficult work. There'll be times when you're out there mapping and you find something and you might suspect it might be this shipwreck that was lost in this general area. But then you have to do the next step of that, characterizing the lake bottom, which is then ground truthing the data, right? So if it's within diving depths, you would send scuba divers down to ground truth, right? Take a look at the targets. We've done that quite a bit. And you might find that what you thought was maybe the shape of a hull is a clay bank. And it's like, oh, that's not a shipwreck.
That's got to be so disheartening to go down there and just see a piece of the lake bed staring back up at you.
Yeah, and you're like, and you're sure. You get your mind in it. You're like, I know that is the shape of something. And then there it is, a clay bank.
In previous years, when there was a shipwreck that you wanted to go find and you had to do all of this work you're describing, what was the likelihood that you were actually going to find that shipwreck that year, that summer? Or are we talking like multiple years at this point?
Oh my goodness, yes. It takes years and years to find shipwrecks. So you might go out with our big team and the expensive tools, and you might spend 2 solid months mapping every day and not find anything. Now, you will have done a lot of science, though, because we're still getting that picture of the lake bottom that we need to understand our Great Lakes. We still now know where there aren't shipwrecks. so it's still good data, but it can take months and months and months.
Case in point, remember the Ohio, that freighter that collided with the Ironton in 1894? It was discovered in 2017. And it still took another 2 years of searching to find the Ironton, resting a few miles away. In fact, it might have taken even longer to find were it not for Ben. B-E-N.
And Ben stands for Bathymetric Explorer Navigator. Hope I remembered that right. It has been a few years.
She does remember that right. Ben is not a person. It's an autonomous boat. A special project that spent time at Thunder Bay helping to map the lake and find shipwrecks. And when I say autonomous, I mean that there's no one on the boat. But that doesn't mean Ben has a mind of its own.
It's a 12-foot-long, yellow, diesel-fueled vessel that goes out and does all the mapping that we've been talking about. It has its very own multi-beam sonar mounted on the bottom, and it is piloted by a team of engineers that stay on shore. They can either program it and send it on its way, or they can use their video game style joysticks to pilot it from shore. And it goes out, collects data, and then it comes back, and then we get a look at the data.
In its trial run at the sanctuary, Ben generated a ton of data, but it hadn't found the ship.
And it wasn't until the last day of that project that we did locate the Ironton.
Oh my God, wow. Ben cut it close, but it did end up proving its value. And all the data it gathered helped push the mapping work forward. Of course, all that data needed to be sorted. That job fell on the researchers to finish. So while the deployment of autonomous boats like Ben have met with some success in Lake Huron, the technology left room for improvement. The dream, then, is to design a truly self-piloting, water-going vessel, something built with enough artificial intelligence that it could be trusted to go out on its own.
So the idea behind this project was, what if we could deploy a robot and the robot could automatically detect when there was something of interest to go up and investigate further, and then it could autonomously survey that item or target at a closer range.
We're reeling in that part of the story right after this. Working Smarter is brought to you by Dropbox Dash, the universal search and knowledge management tool from Dropbox. With Dash, you can quickly search across files, images, videos, and more. That's because Dash connects all the apps you and your team already use, like Canva, Jira, Microsoft 365, to give you a central hub for company content. Once you find what you're looking for, AI-powered writing and organization capabilities help you draft, summarize, and share your work, all from one place. And with comprehensive access controls, you can trust that people will only see the content they're supposed to. So you and your team can move faster, collaborate more securely, and focus on the work that matters most. To learn more about Dropbox Dash and discover a more enlightened way of working, visit workingsmarter.ai/dash.
So for our shipwreck work up in Thunder Bay, we've been deploying underwater robots now for several years.
Katie Skinner doesn't work for Thunder Bay's Marine Sanctuary, but she has spent a lot of time there working on the water and beneath it. She's an assistant professor in the robotics department at the University of Michigan.
So at U of M, I direct the Field Robotics Group, or the Frog Lab, because we all like acronyms.
That is such a great name. Her interest in robots and water and robots in water goes back to growing up by the ocean in Long Island and then studying robotics in university.
I did an internship during my undergrad at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. I think when it first really clicked was we were testing one of the vehicles out on a boat for the day, and just being out on the water, doing research and being able to see the robot dive down, track where it's going, and then see it pop back up later was just such an eye-opening moment for me that was like, wow, this is something I could really pursue.
While researching at Thunder Bay, Katie and her team hunted for shipwrecks using two types of underwater robots.
So one is an Ivor autonomous underwater vehicle, or AUV, and that is, if you can imagine, essentially a torpedo-shaped bright yellow robot. It's about 6 or 7 feet long, and that vehicle has side scan sonar, which is a sensor that's really good for large area survey. For our close range inspections, we're using Blue Robotics, Blue ROVs. So these are vehicles that we can kind of buy online off the shelf, and we adapt them with our own sensors like cameras or sonar that's good for close range surveys. And we can deploy those with a tether, which means we would have a human operating them in close range to the shipwreck. But we've also been working towards methods where they can survey autonomously.
You're on the boat, you have this AUV, you're getting ready to deploy it. What does that process look like? What happens?
Yeah, so first, we do spend time planning the survey that the robot's going to carry out. So this involves working closely with the archeologists, asking them a lot of questions about the site, and we plan exactly where we want that lawnmower survey to be.
See, it's not just me saying these robots are like lawnmowers on a lake.
And we usually deploy the robot off the back of the boat, and it will stay on the surface for a short period of time so that we can make sure that all of the systems are running well and we can start the mission itself. Underwater robots don't actually have access to GPS and Wi-Fi underwater. So it's a big challenge in how the robot can estimate where it is when it is underwater. And for that reason, we typically have it surface at several points in the survey so that it can get GPS lock, correct its navigation, and then dive back down to continue the survey. So the robot's operating autonomously, but we're on the boat just waiting for it to surface to check if there's any errors, and then we can recover the robot when it's done with its mission.
Pretty cool so far, right? Small robots programmed to dive underwater and scan a survey grid on their own. Trouble is, these little AUVs are collecting a ton of information that someone needs to sort.
It's really time consuming to process this data, right? Like sitting down and looking for new discoveries, trying to analyze any changes.
Katie says this can take days or months, depending on how much data a robot is assigned to gather. And in order to tackle that challenge, well,
we're developing machine learning methods to allow the computer, essentially, or the robot, to learn from data in order to detect shipwreck sites. In maybe the 10 years I've been doing this, I do think that the emergence of AI has really opened up new possibilities to things that we couldn't do before, right? I think before we were thinking about surveying and mapping, and now we're really thinking about how we can efficiently interpret the data that we're getting off of our vehicles. And maybe even beyond, efficiency, what we can think about is how can AI models actually allow us to find new things or think about problems in a way that we haven't thought about them before.
As you can probably imagine, training a machine learning model to hunt for shipwrecks isn't easy. It's a long journey to get a robot that understands what it's looking at. First, you have to teach it how to see the data that it gathers. For people who aren't familiar, what does this data look like?
When we get the data back, we process it essentially as a black and white image, and that's easier for machine learning models to process.
Easier, sure, but there's even more to it than that. Because next, the machine learning model needs to understand what all those black and white shapes mean.
What that means is we have some training data the machine learning model sees ahead of time that it uses to learn patterns or learn cues about, what is a shipwreck, what is not a shipwreck.
And in order to help the model see those learned patterns in the actual shipwreck database, you need to label every image methodically, painstakingly.
Labels are really time-consuming to create for training machine learning models. So, some of my grad students spent a lot of time with scientists at Thunder Bay making labels for our data so that we can not just train machine learning models, but also evaluate the models that we're developing. And I can say this took months to curate the data set in a way that we have high-quality labels for shipwreck sites from the data that we have. And that's across 28 different sites.
And when you talk about labels, is it as simple as just having a, sticky note on the data that says this is a shipwreck? Or are you getting as granular as saying this is a mast, this is, the end of a ship, the side of a ship, et cetera?
Yeah, so for our purpose, we focus on the task of shipwreck segmentation. So for segmentation, the labels are actually pixel-wise labels. So every pixel is ship, not ship. There are tools that make that process faster where you can outline different parts of the image and say everything within this outline is shipwreck. So that does help it go faster. But we actually, labeled every part of the shipwreck, including the whole wreckage field. So, sitting down with archeologists who have been to these sites on dives many times, and they can tell us, actually, this right here is a piece of wood that was part of the ship. And we labeled those individual pieces of wood that were lying around the ship. So we went to the very fine grain level because we wanted our machine learning methods to be able to segment shipwrecks in that way. And we wanted to be able to use the segmentations to actually provide information for the robot to do close range surveys. So to know exactly where the bounds of the shipwreck site were.
It might have taken an infinite number of grad students on an infinite number of keyboards to define every pixel of every image of every data set of those 28 shipwreck sites. But once trained, those little robots were sent out on new lawnmower surveys, and the data crunching results were immediately obvious.
When we get the robot back on the boat with our methods that we've developed, we actually can process the data that we've collected in about 5 minutes for an hour-long survey worth of data. So that's something that might take human operators several hours to sort through. So it really makes the process of detecting targets of interest much faster, which cuts down the time that we have between missions and means that while we're actually out on the boat doing a survey, we can go back while we're still there and we don't have to plan a whole new trip to come out and reinvestigate something that we've detected. And then once we have trained the AI models, we want to send them out to explore and come back with interesting new things that we wouldn't have seen before.
What was that like the first time that you saw that model work the way that you anticipated it would?
Yeah, so in the second year of the project, we got to test the AI models that we developed. And the first site we went to was a site we had never been to before. So, we put the robot in the water, we wait for it to come back, we download the data and cross our fingers. And it was pretty incredible to see that really within 5 minutes, it did what we had designed it to do. And it was able to give us a segmentation of the shipwreck site, again, that we had never been to before. So that was pretty exciting to see, wow, we spent all this time in the lab and developing this method and we're, testing it on validation data and things we've seen before, but then seeing it actually work on a laptop on the boat was like, oh, wow, okay, this can actually be really useful. And it's something that got us really excited about the possibilities of this work. My overall goal, of course, would be to find a new shipwreck, right? To be able to just deploy a robot out in Thunder Bay,
Yes.
Sit on the boat, have it survey for the day and come back and tell me what it found, right? So I think that is the dream goal for this project.
With all of the time that you're saving, what are the implications of that for the work you do?
So I think an important aspect of saving time is actually saving cost, right? So it's expensive to go out on a boat every day and to have a whole team go out on a boat every day. I hope that by saving both cost and time, that opens up time to ask some of the more, high-level questions that we want to answer, right? Like, how can we think about looking for new shipwreck sites? There's a lot of work archeologists do that goes into actually thinking about what initial sites we should even survey, right? And all of that takes a lot of time.
Let's say that you have technology, you have AI, something that doesn't even exist today. What does a fully autonomous AI underwater robotic vehicle allow you to accomplish that you just can't do today?
So one thing would really be being able to deploy these robots to go out and continuously, autonomously map the seafloor, map the lake beds, and detect objects that are interesting for us to be aware of and to have a better understanding of. So I really want to someday see us being able to send out fleets of underwater robots, maybe cooperating together to map underwater environments.
And do you think we can get there someday? Like how far away would you say?
I do. Maybe I'm optimistic, but I do think that we can get there. We've gotten further and further on different pieces of this puzzle, I would say, in terms of even multi-robot systems or mapping capabilities. I don't know if I could put a time limit on it, but hopefully in my career.
It took years to find the Ironton. Years to discover that the ship was resting nearly fully intact on the lake bed. Even its lifeboat was found remarkably preserved, still tied to the hull. Katie's dream of fully autonomous, AI-powered underwater robots may not have fully materialized quite just yet, but to think that someday AI bots could help find the 100 other missing ships down in Shipwreck Alley, it's the kind of mission that gets not just Katie excited. Stephanie Gandulla is on board too.
That technology would really be a game changer when it comes to achieving our mission of protecting Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. So, once we go out and find a shipwreck, the work isn't over. We still have to document and monitor. So if we had an autonomous vessel at the ready, we would definitely keep it working all the time, and it would just really increase our ability to share more about the Great Lakes and be a huge benefit to our work.
I wonder, on the other hand, are there parts of your job that you think humans are always going to have to do?
That's a great question. I believe Dr. Skinner's work is really going to be a game changer for taking a whole bunch of data that a computer can go through. But when it comes to interpreting those resources, I don't see how you take that human element out of it. And I don't know if this is selfish, but I do hope that technology doesn't, remove one of my favorite parts of my job, which is indeed scuba diving and visiting these sites. And hopefully it comes to where they can complement each other rather than replace.
We've all been there. Someone sends you a 300-page PDF, or a folder with hundreds of inscrutably named files, or a recording of a meeting that not only has no transcript, but is somehow longer than most director's cuts. And as tempted as you are to take a very long lunch, or even better, a vacation, there are answers buried in there that you need to do your job. So it's up to you to make sense of it all, to dive in, to start mowing the lawn. That's what we used to do, anyhow. Because with AI, we can make that process a little easier, a little faster, whether the answer is buried in your inbox or at the bottom of a lake. But to be clear, speed or efficiency isn't the end goal. What Katie and Stephanie are doing isn't just about finding shipwrecks faster. It's a starting point for deeper learning, a reminder that science isn't just about data, but curiosity and care. It's about building a system of collaboration between humans and machines, where AI becomes a tool to enhance, not replace, our innate ability to observe, interpret, and discover, to help give meaning to the things we find. For Stephanie and Katie, working smarter means less time searching and more time exploring, as only humans can do. Ideally, with a pair of nocturnal burbits swimming nearby. Working Smarter is brought to you by Dropbox Dash, universal search and knowledge management from Dropbox. Find anything and protect everything with Dropbox Dash. Find more episodes of Working Smarter on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and find more interviews like this on our website, workingsmarter.ai. The show would be lost at sea without the talented team at Cosmic Standard, producer Dominic Girard, sound engineer Asia Simpson, technical director Jacob Winnick, and executive producer Eliza Smith. Special thanks to our illustrators Fanny Lohr and Justin Tran, and to Katie Keck for editorial support. Our theme song was composed by Doug Stewart, and I'm Matthew Braga. Thanks for listening.